Hello and welcome back to our cottage garden. This is our June cottage garden diary, so I'm going to show you what we've been working on and some of the changes we've made in the garden in the last month. As you can see, although summer is here, it doesn't feel very summery at all. It's been on-off rain. It feels really cold. I think it's about 15 degrees. We've had a nice little bit of sun occasionally and run outside to make the most of it, but really rainy. I know that a lot of people have been struggling with slugs in their garden. Same to some extent. I have never seen so many slugs. I think it's just perfect conditions for them. One thing that I have been doing recently is brushing up my video editing skills with Skillshare. I've been posting on YouTube for a couple of years now, but I thought it would be a good time to really zoom in on my video editing skills and take some classes. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of courses led by industry experts. From video editing, film, botanical illustration, watercolours and so many more, it's perfect for advancing at work or just for exploring a new hobby. And if you're keen to really deep delve into a certain topic, there are learning paths, which are tailored back-to-back course collections to help you really hone in on a specific skill. And now that summer is here and we've got lots going on in the garden, it's the perfect time for filming, and I thought it would be a really good time for me to improve on my video editing skills. So I've been following a learning path on Skillshare called Level Up Your Video Editing Skills with Adobe Premiere Pro, which starts with the basics of video editing and then moves into more advanced topics like colour correction, animation and audio editing. If you're also keen to discover a new creative hobby or improve your skills at work, the first 500 people to use the link in the video description will get a free month's trial of Skillshare. Go ahead and give it a try. One of the biggest projects that I've worked on in the garden over the last month was finishing the yew hedge that I have been telling you about. So my plan is to have a yew hedge that runs along either side of this lower part of the garden. It's a really big project actually and been quite a lot of work, and probably one of the more expensive things we've done in the garden too. So it feels like it's an investment for the future. I normally like to get a bit of B-roll so I can show you the process of how I'm doing something in the garden, but because it was quite labour intensive, I thought I just really want to crack on with this, so I took some before and after videos to show you, but I don't have a lot of videos of me planting. Actually, don't think I have any videos of me planting them. So these hedges that I've put on this side, they're actually 10 years old, which is amazing. I think I planted about 26 and I've had to order another 4 because I've still got a few gaps, so we're waiting for those to arrive, but I am so happy with how it looks already, and considering this is only going to get better over the next 3 to 5 years until it fully forms a hedge, it's just going to keep getting better. And the reason I wanted to get this hedge in place is because I want it to look really natural and secluded, and so I don't really like having the fence panels on display. And I think by bringing in the backdrop of a really dark evergreen hedge, it kind of should just sink into the background naturally. You won't really notice it, but it means that your eyes won't be distracted by the wooden fence. So I'm hoping that as the years go on, the garden will have a really nice kind of escapist, quiet, peaceful, secluded feel in these 2 lower parts of the garden, and we should have some much better privacy with the hedge as well. There were loads of reasons that I chose yew as the actual hedge that we're using, one of which is that it's evergreen, so we should have a good bit of screening all through the year. It's also a native hedge to the area, so it should provide some benefit to the local wildlife. What I really like about it is that the leaves are really small, so when it comes to trimming it, you can make quite compact and neat shapes, and hopefully as I get more experienced with trimming hedges, I might be able to do some cool wibbly wobbles in it somehow. We'll see how we get on. That will be years down the line though, and a bit of training for me. It's also a really good plant for our garden because our garden isn't neatly south facing, it's kind of straddling diagonally across the compass. So we get pockets of sun and pockets of shade, and then we've got trees that overhang. So I needed a hedge that would do really well in deep shade but also in full sun, and yew is perfect for that. It's a really adaptable plant. And it should live for hundreds of years if we're lucky, so it will live well beyond the extent of our own lifetimes, and hopefully it will give something to the people that end up living here after us. Until we wait for those remaining 4 hedges to arrive though, this is an almost finished yew hedge, and all we need to do now is wait for it to grow into place until I can start trimming it neatly. But I am so pleased we've done this. I wish we did it earlier. In terms of garden observations though, it's been a really lovely time. In the last month we've been lucky enough to have some baby birds nesting in the side of the house. I think they were blue tits, and we did keep an eye on them just to make sure that the dogs weren't interfering when they were ready to fledge the nest, and it was really beautiful to watch. We also spotted a few newts, especially while I was putting the hedges in because I had to move a few rocks around, so again moved them into safety, but lovely to see. And then in terms of flowers, we've had displays from those early summer perennials, and we've got things like roses, geraniums, lamb's ear, campanula, foxgloves, and a few alliums popping up as well. It's a gorgeous time of year and definitely worth sitting out here and observing it when there's time and when the weather permits. I've been tidying up the hedges a little bit and trimming the ligustrum lollipops and the hedges on that side too, just so everything looks a little bit tidier. And I have noticed there's a few gaps in the borders still, so I'm hoping to bring in some roses in the next couple of weeks to fill those, and then I think this area will look amazing every June. Another thing I did at the end of May was go to Chelsea Flower Show, and I have quite a lot of thoughts about this, but it was my first time going, so I didn't really know what to expect. On the whole, I would say I didn't enjoy it because the crowds were way too much for me, and I think if I ever do it again I will probably go in the evening so that there are fewer visitors there. It was really busy and noisy, but we did enjoy it. We managed to go for a walk around at about 7 p.m. when most people had left and have a look at the gardens. I think the thing that I enjoyed most was seeing specialist nurseries in the tent in the middle of the show though, and there were really amazing displays of carnivorous plants, delphiniums and daffodils, and the most pristine plants I've ever seen in my life. It was really quite amazing what these specialist nurseries can do. But when it comes to gardens, I'm not overly keen on the idea of popping something up instantly to then move it again. I feel like especially things like trees and shrubs want to be in the ground for a long time, and it feels really against their interest to be moving them round. So the garden side of it makes me a little bit uncomfortable, but also amazing to see how they've been designed, and I did really enjoy it anyway. In the polytunnel you can see that we finally got our summer crops in the ground, so I did some clearing in here and I cleared out anything that was overwintering. We had loads of just chard and brassicas, kale, that sort of thing, that had gone to seed and gotten really long, so it took me quite a while to cut them all down. I tried to leave the roots in the soil so that I'm not disturbing it too much. Does mean some of them pop back up again, but it's not the end of the world. And I composted everything in situ in the raised beds behind me just to make it a bit faster. And after I'd cleared it, I put down a nice thick mulch of homemade compost. And I was a little bit apprehensive to empty our compost bins because last year I was so busy I really neglected them. They're kind of a low priority for me compared to some other things in the garden, and when I run out of time, I run out of time. But thankfully compost looks after itself, and I'm really not precise with how I do it and the ratios of green and brown. I kind of just put everything in. I make sure I put some sticks in to keep good airflow because I don't often get time to turn the compost piles, and then I just leave them alone. And I think it really helps having the ducks because then we get the straw in there and it means we've got a bit of brown waste to balance out the green waste. But I was really pleased actually with how it was. So I think we got about 8 wheelbarrows of homemade compost, and I used them to put a nice thick mulch on top of the soil, and some mulch in the raised beds over there as well. And this will be really good to give some nutrients to our summer crops like our tomatoes. They're quite hungry, but it will also help lock moisture in the soil. I was actually a little bit worried about the state of the soil in here. It was really dry, so the mulch should help with that. Once the mulch was down, it was ready for the tomatoes to go in, and this was a little bit later than I'd like to. I think it was the last week of May, but sometimes you get behind and things usually catch up, and you can see that they have caught up. So I'm really pleased with that. There's 3 different varieties of tomatoes all jumbled around, and I try not to plant consistently on the same side each year, so I've got most of them on this side. Last year they were on that side. There's still a couple here, but to rest the soil I've got some beans in the soil there, so it's kind of like a loose crop rotation. While I was emptying the compost, I go really slowly because I do often find wildlife nesting in there. It's good for all sorts of things, frogs, toads, snakes, etc. This year I did find a couple of toads, and I even found a wasp nest in there, so I had to go carefully around that. I just moved the toads somewhere safe so that they weren't going to get hurt while I was digging the compost out though. But that was really, really lovely to see. It's always nice to see a bit of wildlife in the garden. After I got the tomatoes in, I also installed an irrigation system, and again this is a completely new thing to me, so there's some hose pipes down here and some sprinklers attached to them. They're quite low so they won't get water on the leaves of the plants, and this will water the soil every 3 days for about 15 minutes, and I'm still experimenting with what's the right amount to keep the soil moist, especially as the weather warms up in summer, but so far so good, and this is just another thing that will help keep the soil healthy. Admittedly, I was really lazy with watering over winter, and that was why the soil dried out and looked really unhealthy. So if I can keep it consistently watered, that will be amazing. So it's all good in here. I'm really, really excited and can't wait to start harvesting tomatoes in the next month or so. And that's all of the updates from our cottage garden in the last month. Be sure to give us a subscribe if you'd like to watch the garden develop over the months and years, and we'll see you next time.